Hello all, Rick here. Starfleet might be known as the foremost exploration organisation of the Alpha and Beta quadrants, but it's far from the only one. After all, Starfleet itself was formed out of the joining of multiple species' own space agencies into one entity, but generally, every power that is out there has their own equivalent division. The Klingons, for example, do maintain exploration directives, but they're bound up with their more military-minded Klingon Defense Force, or KDF. The notion of Klingon explorers might seem at odds with their focus and historic reliance on creating vassals through forceful expansion, but just as there are Klingon lawyers, there are of course scientists, and those pathfinders who desire nothing more than to explore. The Klingon history leading to space exploration is one that is far more violent than Starfleet's, or at least a different kind. While Earth was fortunate enough to establish first contact with the peaceful Vulcans, the Empire, according to most apocryphal sources, did not have it as easy. Most agree that, if not first contact with alien life, one of the earliest encounters the Klingons had was with the hur'q, who did a real number on Kronos, but they bit off more than they bargained for with the Klingons. While depictions of them vary with media, what is generally assumed is that the Klingon Empire captured the Outsiders' vessels and began to reverse engineer them to learn warp technology. This led them to expand and drive off the invaders, but taught them an early lesson that space could be hostile and others often sought to claim things by force. We know that by the end of Kalus's life, the Klingon Empire was beginning to experiment with space travel in earnest with their own vessels. When Kalus passed, he famously pointed to the Star of Boreth and told his followers that he would return one day and that they were to look for me there on that point of light. The monastery of Boreth was established on that world not long after, which is still a fair distance from Kronos according to most maps. This journey was even completed centuries ago, as the monastery was ancient by the time of the 23rd century already. In the early 22nd century and before, the Klingon Empire was less organised than it would become. At this time, while there was a Klingon Imperial fleet, it was not operating under one banner, and each house was responsible for its own ships and forces. This led to a very sporadic spread of Klingons, as they pushed outwards generally without a care for what their neighbouring houses were doing. The goal at the time was rather feudal, and merely to claim resources or territory for their house, expanding its influence and opportunity. This led to a large variety of approaches to exploration, but the factor behind it was the same. No matter the preference of the captain of a vessel, they were to go out, explore, find something useful, and get it for your house. Alongside the naval powers they operated, the Klingon Empire also maintained a strong science division, usually one that was bound up with a single house, and unfortunately, the Empire's aggressive actions had earned them a bad reputation. Klingons were often unwelcome at scientific gatherings, with individuals like hur'q having to visit them in disguise. hur'q's house itself was a rather small one and thus found itself under the thumb of a larger one, General K'Var. While hur'q was more focused on scientific advancement for the sake of it, K'Var was very much focused on the growth and what he could bring to the Empire and his house, so he funded and supplied hur'q, but the results were for his military application. For the majority of time within the Empire, this is how things simply were. The development of new technologies and exploration of new areas was all done with the goal of funneling resources to the houses of the Empire. Force was seldom dismissed as an option, and generally the go-to by a rising warrior-centric culture who prized displays of strength over negotiation. Those who resisted were bullied into complying, so that even individuals who personally prioritised other goals ended up feeding into this machine. Not much changed, even with the reformation of the Great Houses and the conversion of the Imperial fleet into the Klingon Defense Force. While the Klingon Empire began acting more as a single entity, their approach to exploration did not vary. You may have a Klingon captain who had the heart of an explorer, but they would have to act out to benefit their house in the prevailing way, claiming resources, marking vulnerable alien colonies as potential targets, and the like. all with the aim of increasing the power of their house. Otherwise, their house risked falling behind other developing ones and being consumed or destroyed by a rival. It was simply how the Empire worked. The signing of the Khitomer Accords were a massive deal to the Klingon Empire, not only for the peaceable laws it established between the former war adversaries, but also for the exchanges that were now permitted. First and foremost, Klingon vessels are now permitted to travel through Federation territory, and vice versa, so long as it is not for military action. This means that the majority of the Alpha Quadrant suddenly opened up to them. Before now, Klingon territory only claimed a small area of the Alpha, being primarily a Beta force, meaning that the Klingon Empire could now head unimpeded to places like Bajor, Cardassia, and beyond, without risking conflict with the UFP. Now, for the more glory-hunting warrior-minded among the Klingons, this was probably not seen as a good thing, but fortunately the High Council was not comprised of short-sighted aggressors at the time. Federation space, too, is also often patrolled, and Klingon vessels could pass through without incident, something that they generally had not experienced outside of their own territory either. With the lessening in need for a strict war-first approach to everything, gradual changes came to the Empire. The Federation would not permit a large Klingon armed task force in its territory, nor the harassment and claiming of resources at whim. But traders were free to establish their own ties. Scientists were allowed to attend open conferences, and explorers were permitted to conduct their operations. The loss of praxis, too, encouraged more trade. Essentially, now the Klingon Empire had a reason to put such professions first, and we saw a rise in Klingons beyond the warrior. Merchants, scientists, stellar cartographers, tradesmen, and all sorts who were previously tools of the houses were now finding greater sway in peacetime. This lasted through to the escalation of the Dominion War, when the changeling-manipulated Empire closed its borders and withdrew from the Khitomer Accords briefly. Of course, when this was all exposed, the Accords were re-established, and after the war it looks like the Empire has returned to a state of cooperation with the Federation. One thing that the Klingons do maintain, however, is that when they do explore, they do so with a bravado that even the Federation would stare at agape. Generational voyages were common, the implementation of stasis modules for long-term assignments, even before the Klingons had warp factors to reach far-flung corners of the sky. They were just loading up ships with crews and flying off into the unknown with no clue if they would survive. Starfleet has sensor nets and observatories and numerous scouting missions that methodically expand their horizons. The Klingons just pick a point that looks interesting, or they have some prophecy concerning it, and just go. So while the Klingons' relation with the exploration missions has been less consistent than Starfleet's, they do have them, mostly in the service of expanding the Empire's resource pool and colonial possibilities. What really changed was the motivation. Klingons who preferred or saw the benefit in seeking adventure over adversaries found themselves more empowered over time, and the KDF shifted to include more peaceable missions of fact-seeking. However, it is also true that they do not maintain any sort of prime directive to govern interference in other cultures, instead deferring to their honour system and the challenge of the tasks ahead. In that way, they're the kind of explorers that would climb a mountain just to prove that they could. Scientists and those not of blood-shedding inclination would often have to work alongside those who typically held greater sway in the Empire, or bend their ear to the challenges and glory that awaited beyond combat. Thanks for watching this video on the nature of Klingon exploration. Outside of the Federation, they probably have the most fleshed out history and lore, alongside the Romulan-Vulcan connection, and the Vulcan model of exploration basically became the blueprints for what Starfleet became. So, until the next video, I've been Rick, and I'll see you later for another lore discussion, breakdown, or other video. Until then, thanks again, and goodbye.